Ask you first about this gambling scandal that's rocked the NBA. Of course, the NBA isn't the only league that's been dealing with this, other sports as well. But what is your message?
Yeah, I hear him throw that in there. Other sports. Now, look at Adam Silver's face. He don't look like a happy man that want to talk about that.
Watch Adam Silver's expression closely in that moment. It isn't the confident, composed look of someone fully in control of their league's image. Instead, it's the face of a man who understands the magnitude of a story spiraling beyond anyone's control. And in this case, his concern is entirely justified. What began as a single player tipping off gambling information has grown into a far-reaching situation implicating multiple levels of professional basketball. Initially, the story seemed contained, barely a blip in the public consciousness. But now, the WNBA is directly in the spotlight, and the implications could reshape perceptions of the league's integrity. This crisis is not about a single incident or a momentary lapse. It's about the structural vulnerability of professional sports leagues under the modern pressures of gambling and insider access. While mainstream attention is focused primarily on the NBA due to its larger audience and higher stakes, the WNBA is under increasing scrutiny precisely because it operates within the same organizational umbrella. This shared infrastructure means that policies, oversight procedures, and risk management frameworks overlap. So scandal in one division inevitably casts shadows across the other. The WNBA, which has worked hard to elevate its profile and maintain credibility, now faces an existential reputational threat as details emerge about the mishandling of insider information. The FBI's renewed involvement is particularly concerning. Investigators are digging into instances that were largely overlooked in previous reports, tracing the flow of information and examining whether internal controls were sufficient to prevent manipulation of games for betting purposes. This scrutiny highlights not only the initial breach, but also systemic weaknesses that allowed the situation to escalate. For fans, players, and executives alike, the story has transitioned from isolated wrongdoing to a broader narrative of accountability or lack thereof. Every statement made, every action taken, becomes evidence in a larger investigation, amplifying the stakes.
Gambling situation, because the NBA did their own investigation and they swept all of this under the rug, which caused an investigation into the NBA. Well, the NBA released another statement a little bit after that, came out that he had to go meet with Capitol Hill, that they was doing a new investigation into the NBA, pretty much, and the WNBA. We haven't heard nothing come out from that investigation, y'all, and it's been about 3-4 months.
October 2024 marked a pivotal moment in professional basketball oversight. Adam Silver appeared before Congress to testify about gambling, corruption, and the governance of professional basketball leagues. No footage from a hearing was released, a detail that should immediately raise questions. In situations where organizations are confident about transparency and regulatory compliance, proceedings are broadcast, recorded, and archived publicly. The absence of footage suggests the league was operating in damage control mode rather than as a model of openness. Behind closed doors, however, the story was far more serious than the public realized. The FBI presented evidence indicating that the NBA had prior knowledge of illegal gambling activities linked to Terry Rozier, going back to 2019 or 2020. Rather than taking decisive action, the league allegedly conducted an internal review, uncovered troubling findings, and chose to minimize or ignore the problem. This internal decision to sweep under the rug has had lasting consequences, forcing Silver into a position where he had to answer to federal investigators and, by extension, the public. While much of the conversation surrounding the NBA centered on secrecy and optics, the WNBA is now facing similar scrutiny. Reports indicate that referees in the Women's League are under investigation for allegedly manipulating games to favor betting outcomes, mirroring the same vulnerabilities that cause problems in the NBA. This development exposes a structural issue that has long been overlooked. Oversight procedures in professional basketball, particularly regarding game integrity and officiating, are often more performative than substantive. While statements from league officials reassure the public that rigorous review systems exist, the reality is that accountability is minimal. Calls made by referees are generally accepted as final, with little independent verification or mechanism to challenge potential misconduct. This creates an environment in which those with inside knowledge or with incentives to manipulate outcomes can act with minimal risk of detection.
Worry about the game's integrity right now.
My message is the integrity is absolutely solid. So the scandal, as you called it, is an incident from 2.5 years ago involving one player who allegedly tipped other accomplices that he was going to be coming out of a game early because he was injured. But so that's, to me, an isolated incident so far. Having said that, we take it absolutely seriously. I understand from a fan standpoint that there's nothing more important than the integrity of the game. And I think, recently we put in some new rules around injury reporting just to address incidents like that, so that information is released as soon as it's known to the teams, and so that there's a level playing field of people who may be betting on the game, so they have the same information.
The WNBA's internal operations are now under intense scrutiny, particularly regarding referee oversight, and this has placed Cathy Engelbert in a difficult position. Engelbert has publicly asserted that WNBA referees do not manipulate games, and that a comprehensive review process exists to ensure the accuracy of every call. At face value, this appears reassuring, but the reality is more concerning. Investigations and internal audits have revealed that the review process is largely procedural rather than substantive. Calls made by referees are accepted as final, with minimal independent evaluation or accountability measures. Essentially, the system assumes that referees are correct, even when external evidence might suggest otherwise. In the context of a gambling investigation, this lack of oversight creates a critical vulnerability. Referees who wield the authority to influence the flow of a game can operate without fear of correction. There's no external audit mechanism, no independent review panel, and very little transparency into the decision-making process. A referee wishing to influence outcomes could, in theory, manipulate key plays, and the league's existing protocols would offer little resistance. This structural gap undermines the integrity of the WNBA and raises difficult questions about how the league monitors potential conflicts of interest. Moreover, the potential for systematic manipulation is amplified by the increasing involvement of gambling operators and betting analytics. Abnormal betting patterns often serve as the first indication that something is amiss, but by the time these anomalies are detected, significant influence may already have occurred. Unlike in other industries with stringent internal controls, the WNBA's oversight framework is reactive rather than proactive. This means that games could be altered without immediate detection, and only when betting companies identify irregularities does the league intervene. This reactive approach is far from ideal and opens the door to both intentional misconduct and public perception challenges. The implications are not limited to referees alone. Players and coaches are also potentially entangled in these investigations, creating a complex web of accountability. Allegations that insiders may have shared non-public information with gamblers introduce serious legal and ethical concerns. This situation challenges the league's ability to maintain a level playing field and protect its athletes from the fallout of misconduct they may not have participated in. For Engelbert, defending the WNBA's integrity while simultaneously acknowledging these vulnerabilities is a precarious balancing act. The system as currently structured allows manipulation without immediate consequences, undermining confidence in both the league's governance and its commitment to fair competition.
Sports betting is booming, legalized, that is. But do you worry that the culture, the accessibility of it may be part of the problem here?
I mean, to your point, there's a huge growing legalized sports betting business, and now the prediction markets are part of that as well. There's also probably an even larger illegal sports betting market. So for me, the options are illegal betting or legal betting. And given that choice, we'd much rather there be legal betting where there's transparency. For example, in the case you mentioned before, we spotted it first along with the betting.
So when Adam Silver appeared on Good Morning America to discuss the scandal, his unease was immediately apparent. The optics of the interview conveyed a clear message. This is not a casual media appearance, but a high-stakes moment in which the credibility of both the NBA and WNBA was on the line. Silver's carefully constructed answers emphasized that the incident he discussed was an isolated event involving a single player from 2.5 years ago. According to him, Terry Rozier had allegedly tipped off accomplices about leaving a game early due to injury, providing them with insider information that could be used for betting purposes. Silver's attempt to frame this as a contained individual occurrence was designed to reassure the public and minimize reputational damage. However, the federal indictment paints a far more complicated picture. While Silver insisted that the issue was confined to one player and one incident, documentation indicates that multiple teams and personnel were involved in sharing non-public information with gamblers. This includes players and coaches from several NBA franchises, each contributing to a network of insider leaks. The scale of these activities indicates systemic vulnerabilities rather than isolated mistakes. By extension, the WNBA, operating under the NBA umbrella, is implicated in similar patterns of potential exposure. The league's oversight, reporting mechanisms, and referee review processes are all under examination, raising questions about how well the WNBA can prevent similar misconduct internally. Silver's public narrative attempts to isolate the problem temporally and personally, But evidence suggests a much broader structural challenge. The league has protocols in place, yet these have proven insufficient to prevent insider sharing of sensitive information. Investigators are examining whether the existing controls are robust enough, whether reporting mechanisms function effectively, and whether any individuals within the league leverage positions of authority for financial or competitive advantage. The public sees one story, a single player, a singular incident, but behind the scenes, the scale and complexity of the investigation are extensive. This discrepancy between public statements and documented findings undermines confidence in league leadership. Silver's framing is intended to reassure stakeholders, but the reality is that the WNBA faces parallel investigations with similar vulnerabilities. While he emphasized isolated wrongdoing in his interview, the systemic nature of insider leaks and the lack of rigorous oversight are clear red flags. In professional sports, transparency and accountability are crucial to maintaining legitimacy, particularly in leagues striving to grow their brand and cultural influence. For the WNBA, this is an urgent lesson in proactive governance and the need for robust checks and balances across all operational levels. Ultimately, Silver's narrative may have served as damage control, but it does not resolve the underlying structural challenges. Without substantive reform, the league risks repeated exposure, potentially compromising not only competitive integrity, but also public trust in women's professional basketball. This episode is a wake-up call for the WNBA to enhance its oversight systems, clarify accountability mechanisms, and ensure that every participant, from referees to executives, adheres to the highest standards of integrity.
Submit it. Hold up. So they did catch you. Let's listen.
Transparency, for example, in the case you mentioned before, we spotted it first along with the betting companies because there was aberrational behavior betting on the so-called unders for that game. So we think we're much better off if there's going to be betting, and there will be, that it be in a legal, transparent framework rather than be controlled, by bad